Hello and welcome to Bloomberg Quint. I have with me Mark Weinberger, Global Chairman and CEO of EY. Mark, thanks very much for speaking with us. It's been an interesting day in Davos here. We've had everybody talking about Trump and protectionism in the US, and everybody else talking about President Xi's address and his batting for globalization. Who would have thought?
It's very interesting. You're so right. A lot of talk, and I think what's really going to be interesting is when the new president takes his position, and China and the U.S. government sit down, and Russia's involved in bilaterals with the United States and the like, to see what really happens. And so, it's hard to imagine the whole world shifting overnight in completely different directions. There's a lot of politics going on, a lot of posturing, but I'm hopeful they'll get together soon.
What is President Trump going to mean for the global economy and the U.S. economy?
Well, it's unknown, obviously, so we're all trying to figure that out.
What's your expectation? You worked with governments closely.
I have, and I still do. I think that clearly we're going to see some sort of stimulus to the United States. That's either deregulation, infrastructure spending, lower tax rates, and maybe a different tax base, going to more of a territorial system like the rest of the world. And that'll be stimulative and cause, I think, the global economy as a whole to rise, because everyone does well if the U.S. economy does well. I do think there's a risk with a higher dollar, and especially if inflation goes up and if the deficit goes up by a significant amount. So they're going to have to watch that it's fiscally responsible. But I think that'll be positive.
But do you think he's going to keep in mind fiscal responsibility?
I do, and if he doesn't, I think the Republican Congress, who's been very steadfast on that issue, will be a check and balance.
Okay. One of the things that strikes us about President-elect Trump's plan is his desire to cut rates. You were just telling me that in fact makes the U.S. Catching up with the rest of the world. How do you see these tax cuts, sort of come through over the next few years?
Well, what's probably going to happen, and really the desire has been for a lower corporate tax rate and getting rid of many of the deductions and credits and other incentives that are in the code to make it more simple, to offset the cost of lowering the rate, and moving to a system like the rest of the world that taxes U.S. domestic companies on their U.S. income and not taxing them globally on top of the foreign taxes they already pay. That's the two big levers. There's been an introduction of what's called a border adjustment tax as well to help pay for that rate reduction and to deal with the European tax system principally that has a border adjustable tax the U.S. does not. That's very complicated the way the U.S. is designing it, and a lot of questions need to be answered.
You think he's going to go all the way down to 15% on the corporate tax?
I think 15 will be really hard because, again, if you're going to be fiscally responsible, it means you have to raise a lot of taxes elsewhere. I think, anything from the low 20s makes it very competitive with the rest of the world, especially if they change the tax base, and I think that's realistic.
With the Fed moving rates higher, and now with this tax cut, we're potentially looking at a scenario where both portfolio investment and foreign direct investment might move towards the U.S. I mean, we're already seeing that happen in portfolio investment. What does that mean for emerging markets that are so reliant on foreign funds?
Well, it will certainly mean different things to different emerging markets, of course, but you're right. I mean, if the interest rates do go up, if we have stimulus in the United States, if the dollar gets stronger, there's going to be a movement of currencies there, and it will certainly cause volatility in the emerging markets. We've seen that happen in the past when the threat of interest rates going up by just the Fed was the real lever. So I think there is going to be some volatility.
Where do you see India stand in all of this?
Well, India, relative to the rest of the world, remains very strong. I mean, India's economy is not growing where it was before the demonetization of the high-end currency, but it still has a very high growth rate just behind China. And so I think we're very still optimistic, and especially with many of the changes being made there around the tax system, the GST tax. I think there's still great room for more growth for India. Certainly slower in the short term, a pause here as people digest the demonetization and what it may mean. But I think longer term, these are positives.
What did you think of the demonetization move?
Well, I think like anything, the principle seems strong. I mean, yes, in my mind. I mean, if you're really trying to, I was at a fintech dinner here in Davos. And the whole talk was, how is the global economy going to move to a moneyless system where we're dealing with technology and people who are on a system, and you don't have all this potential for black market, for corruption, and you have a way to make sure that you can transfer money and to lower income people easier on that system. Well, India is setting itself up to someday maybe be able to do that. Now, Doing it, though, of course, causes much disruption. And the way they did it, of course, to do away with the planning that can be done if you put it out over many years, certainly caused that disruption. And many people were hurt in the short term who weren't able to go ahead and spend money real time. And so I think, they got to work through that. And I think this budget coming up that we'll see in February needs to provide some stimulus for some of those people.
You're saying stimulus? We were trying very hard, or have been for the last few years,
Yeah.
to walk the fiscally responsible path.
Well, I think you could be fiscally responsible, but you have to help no matter what. We're seeing it around the world. Those who are being left behind and left out, those who are suffering, don't think about being fiscally responsible. They need to be dealt with. And if you have people who suffered because of the demonetization, I think you just got to be aware, what can we do to make sure that they're in the short term covered so they don't have, their lives aren't disrupted.